of today. Perfect. What are you each working on in your individual organizations? And then attached to that is what values do you and your organization see in participating within the Housing Justice League?
Yeah. There's something.
Yeah, go ahead.
So at Urban Homeworks, one thing about us is we provide affordable housing in Minneapolis and parts of St. Paul. So we are a landlord. We have rental units, about 134 rental units, in North and South, and like I said, some in St. Paul. So we really are intentional about providing dignified, stable housing, but not stopping there. And we are committed to like homeownership pathways, opportunities, meaning one we develop as well and refurbish homes to then sell to community at affordable rates. That's a lot of what we were working on even this past legislative session, the ability to build and create new homes, but sell them at an affordable rate to community. So homeownership is really important to us, like Owen touched on earlier. It is a wealth generator for the average American that has been systemically denied, for Black folks specifically, for Indigenous folks specifically, and we are committed to being part of the change in that. So participating in Housing Justice League with a focus on TOPA, that's an easy yes. When we think of transferring ownership from out of state or corporate landlord back to community members, and when we think of the reinvestment and revitalization that is happening in places like North, ownership is a key piece to ensuring that the community members are the ones benefiting from that reinvestment versus being displaced because of that investment. So being able to work on policy that ensures that families and individuals can buy the homes they've been living in often for generations, and start building wealth that is their right, that they should have been able to. That's an easy yes for us. So coming to the table to support TOPA and be a part of HJL, it is in deep alignment with the work we're doing at an board level already.
Yeah, I work for Homeline. We are a nonprofit that offers legal advocacy and organizing services to any renter in Minnesota. So very specifically, my work is very community focused. I'm in buildings talking with people on a very regular basis, daily basis, about their experiences, whether that looks like major repair issues, threats of displacement through rent increases or building sales, etc. I've heard in the last few years that I've been here, a very urgent needs. And in my work, when we look at what I do on a daily level, individually, it's very easy to get tunnel vision and focus just on that and focus on trying to, staunch the bleeding at an individual, with individual tenants in individual rental communities. But being able to come into a coalition space where I'm working with multiple and partnering with, other organizations, other people that are working towards the same ideals of community centered, tenant and community centered work, it offers me and Homeline the opportunity to kind of move back and forth between it's that we're experiencing. I can take what I'm hearing, bring it to this level, and look at a larger bird eye view of, okay, if we keep having these issues, how do we move upstream? How do we look further up and say, we got to do something 6 steps before people are losing their housing because somebody's selling their building. That's why we're here. We can show, I believe. And yeah, I think it's pretty.
But, yeah, Jewish Community Action is it's like a membership led organization of Jews across the Twin Cities area and some pockets of greater Minnesota. And we do work across a number of different, campaigns. I specifically am the housing justice organizer, and housing justice campaign has been part of JCA's work since we opened. And kind of broadly, the way I think about my work in many different geographies is like, how do we rectify Jewish values with the current housing crisis we find ourselves in? Right. So how can we choose to invest in Jewish textual sources, in Jewish community, try and show up in like real solidarity, right, to address the immense violence and displacement that's going on all throughout the US and specifically in Minnesota. So it looks different across different geographies. I work some in the suburbs and I work some in the cities. But I kind of inherited the HJL work from my amazing predecessor, Aaron Burke. And it hits close to home for our membership. We had a member who to interrupt the sale of his building and collectivize. He wanted to get a group of tenants together to buy his building, and he came face to face with the obstacles that folks currently facing, right? And so I think since then, right, like HJL has been and continues to be a central space for us to try and live out our Jewish values to address the central power dynamic in the housing system. And I've been really grateful as somebody who's only been on the job for, I don't know, a year and a half now. Like this space has this collective memory and history to bring folks along, right? To teach us why we're already in the fight for TOPA and how we grow this movement moving forward. And then, something that I've been thinking about a lot, I just did a tabling session at a little Jewish arts market called Southside Shtetl, which was amazing, right? And the focus was housing for this market, in terms of raising some money for the Outer Neighborhood Association's Renters Fund. And there's just a large question in the Jewish community of like, how do you make home in diaspora, right? And I think that's really connected to TOPA and community ownership, right? Like, what does it look like to own our communities is a huge question that has been following the Jewish people around for as long as I can remember, right? So I think HJL is like a really crucial space for us to be living around values and to be showing up in strong solidarity. And that's kind of broadly how we find ourselves to be in this coalition and why we see it as really valuable to be investing time.
Beautiful. Well, I hope folks enjoyed hearing a little bit about Urban Homeworks, Homeline, and the Jewish Community in Action. Yeah, to kind of just follow up and tie the strings between what you all have shared. I know each of your organizations also work in various other different campaigns and coalitions. So really curious to see how folks have seen the various conversations that are, and surrounding housing and are directly related to housing, how they've intersected in our ecosystem.
I think that's really well answered by the fact that while we're focused on housing within Housing Justice League, the participants, participating organizations, their sole focus isn't always housing. And even if it is, it's coming at it from different directions. I think that this space that we have really supports that a holistic viewpoint, that housing stability isn't just about being able to stay in a place. It's also related to your food security. It's also related to your transportation accessibility and to your access to your voting rights. And I think what we're seeing in this space and a lot of our conversations that we have about how we approach getting community ownership into the people, like into the hands of the people that live in that community, in that neighborhood, really reinforces the idea that thriving for individuals, for households, for families, for neighborhoods, for people isn't determined by. It is determined by multiple things, and we're taking one angle at it, but our viewpoint, I think, and all of our experiences brings in just 1,000 different perspectives, and we're very open to that.
Yeah, I would add to that. I think it's so easy for us to come together with different perspectives, whether that's us not being a housing focused org, or even being a housing focused org, like from Homeline to even Urban Homework, like we do very different things, but like you said, we come together really on that foundational piece of housing being a human right. And I think there's no confusion there, there's no tension there, and because there isn't, even if we have differing opinions on how do we achieve this, or how do we move forward in that, and we're really grounding ourselves first and foremost that, yeah, housing is a human right. And then I'm also seeing a shift in a lot of housing spaces, but what's been really cool to see in Housing Justice League is that community centered, community led initiative that's really grounding us. Is we want to make sure that we're not doing work that deviates from the needs, desires, and wishes of community, and creating processes that allow us to um, thoughtfully hear from community, intentionally partner with them. So these policies, when they win, we can say it's a true community win, versus we passed this policy and then the everyday person is just like, okay, and what does this mean for me? So I think those are two pieces that really allow us to come together, and I'm hearing it in other spaces, and I'm hoping that that really starts to change the tide in how we do this work. And even though it's still great that the why is centered and really firm on housing being a human right.
Yeah, and speaking to that too, I think that our movement ecosystem is grappling with how to do our work sustainably and not have it determined by external forces, right? Like I think case in point in that is watching the way that, in Minneapolis specifically, right, our city council has frankly not had the courage or the willpower to move on progressive housing policy, right? So what does it look like as organizers and folks who want to root themselves in community for that not to be the end of the conversation, right? Like at a moment when the political possibility for a specific policy doesn't seem feasible, how do we still continue to do our work and build power? Right? And I think that speaks to the how, right? Like what spaces are we building? In what ways are we rooting in community? In what ways are we actually being led by the folks who are most affected by housing injustice? And those conversations, I think, are really like they are rich and like at the forefront right now, especially in Housing Justice League, because I think that regardless of a policy being passed tomorrow, if there's not the infrastructure and the community will to take advantage of it and use it to like shape the community in their own image, then what good was it, right? And I think what we've been talking about in the coalition is going from a specific campaign viewpoint to a movement viewpoint, right? This is not about a specific set of meetings that we're mobilizing folks based on wards so that a specific piece of policy can get passed. That's important, and that's always going to be a part of our work, right? But if that's the end all be all, what are we really building? So I'm really excited, and I'm really excited for housing justice in Minneapolis specifically has such an amazing lineage. There's such amazing wisdom. This work has been going on for so long, and there's a density of like organizations that see housing as a priority. It's just really, it's a privilege to be able to get to be a part of these conversations, I feel like.
Yeah, thank you each for your answers here, and we kind of touched on some of the other questions here. So for the sake of moving to our next set, I'll ask the last question here. What has, and we kind of touched on it already in some of your responses back. But what is the current conversation that Housing Justice League is engaging in around housing? And we touched on from being community centered to being authentic to really challenging the system, right? And creating transitioning from a campaign to a movement and really being intentional and creating something that will outlast even the current iteration of the Housing Justice League organization, right? So I'll hand that question back over to you all. I'll restate it for you. You know, what is the conversation that is currently being engaged in within the Housing Justice League? Cool.
Yeah, I can give you a talk with that. I think that there has been an interesting growth in our coalition space over the past 7 months. Um, for folks on the call, there was sort of an immediate roadblock and the Minneapolis City Council was considering specific policy language for TOPA recently, a year and a half ago, is that right?
Yeah.
And it became deprioritized. And I think it gave our coalition a chance to take a step back and revise our strategy, but also restructure the way in which we were doing work together. So we went through some really intentional, like strategizing. We did a retreat to try and figure out like in what ways can we do our work better together so that we're coming to a more authentic and like unified goal in our organizing. And we like adopted a 0 to 5 consensus structure. We have onboarding documents now, and it sounds small or like, that's just how things work, but it was a really huge culture shift. And I think it allowed us to take that step back and think more about ourselves as uh, hoping to create an engine for continual systemic change in housing as opposed to a policy focused, you know, pass the policy at all costs end goal organization. And I think that's kind of the way that our conversation has shifted. So we've been thinking more about, how do we create a stable space for tenant input so that we can center community voices in major, policy changes, but also like structuring of getting funding for housing and, how do you build a tenant union, right? Like these are all things that individual organizations are already doing and have a great track record in. But what would it look like if like the coalition and the multiple resources that are at the table based on a bunch of different nonprofits were like committing to a vision and goal and trying to build space for that in Minneapolis. So that's like a little bit of the arc of like what we've been talking about, right? And it it very easily could have been that like after TOPA was deprioritized in city council, organizations could have looked at themselves in terms of self-interest and kind of walked away from the table. And I think it's special that we didn't, right? And exciting to me. But yeah, those are some of my thoughts. I'll shut up.
No, yeah, that's spot on. I think what's been exciting about Housing Justice League is seeing the commitment of each org to dive in and do the foundational work. So I think it's made the work in the past few months easier. Not to say the work is easy, but I just imagine if we hadn't created the again, like the processes, the structure, the 0 to 5, just the way we engage. I remember those early months in the fall, we were spending several meetings just on this like this one thing. But it really allows us to like here we are being able to make decisions pretty quickly and still authentically. Because when we've established those relational pieces, but just a solid foundation that makes sense. We're able to bring people on and coach them into the process. So there's this fluid nature that it's not disrupted once new people come in, but they get to really just come in and let's go. And I think we have now created a more sustainable structure that will outlive us, where it's not dependent on our orgs or even the people who are representing these orgs right now to be there at the table for TOPA to move forward or for any other collective or community ownership model we want to pursue to move forward. We can really allow for people to step in and step out and the work still move well. It's not choppy because of the foundational work we did in the beginning.
And I'll speak to that as somebody who is like a relatively new, like representative to this space, like the ability to just step in and say, okay, let's review what's going on, you know, I was fed the everything that y'all are talking about. It's very clearly set up, and what that allows was exactly what Tammy said. There was no, hold on, what's going on? Let's catch me up. It was, right, I'm gonna take the baton and we're now meeting as a group. It didn't have to, there didn't have to be that same catch-up time because it was already all set up for me, and it was very easy to take on. Even without all the context, you know, context is easily provided when you need to ask questions of like, how did this happen? But when you have the ability to confidently like fall into this is how we make decisions. This is how baseline, how we communicate with each other. And that leadership is able to be, you know, move between people, you know, it's not centered on an organization or two organizations. It's not centered to people as representatives. It's really giving the whole table to everybody. And that I think allows for us to have more expansive ideas and to say, maybe pushing for a policy isn't gonna be the end goal here, because if we don't have a council that is open to that, willing to back that, why, then what do we do? We know that this is what community wants. We know that this is what we have heard and that this is where we need to move towards. And having that strong base has allowed for us, I think, to open imagination is just like so much more to the possibilities. And to call out like illegitimate systems to say, you know what, we're not going to keep participating in this. We're not going to just keep trying to like force the issue with people that don't want to listen. We're going to find our own way through this. We're going to listen to, you know, the people around us, the people in this group, the tenants, the people that live in our neighborhoods that are experiencing this displacement, these, you know, these threats to their stability every day. And that's how we're gonna do it. We're gonna build this whether or not still.
Yeah, and I think modeling the way that we work with each other in the hopes of like creating a culture the way we want to work with community has been fantastic. Right? Like I think everybody at the table right now firmly say that like we have work to do to grow our actual community connections, right? But like setting up a culture in which we feel ready to actually like receive folks and like truly try and like connect with them and lift up and have them step into their own power is rare, I feel like. And it feels like we're moving towards that, even as like we continue to acknowledge that, you know, weekly meetings right now, it's all staff. And we've like had a conversation about that. Like we don't want to be nonprofit staff sitting in a room making decisions for community. Like we want it to be guided by the voices who are actually the center of our. So
Love this, y'all. I hope folks in the room are also, I see some comments coming in, so really excited that folks are hopefully resonating with the conversation so far. But we'll move into the organizing aspect of what we've been working on within the Housing Justice League. So as mentioned in the previous conversation we just wrapped, there are many entities and individuals organizing against displacement in our communities. And advocating for more local and community ownership of housing, of private property, and of collective green spaces. There are so many active and innovative campaigns and efforts to advance housing stability and justice in our communities. What specifically are we working with within the Housing Justice League that aligns with what communities are already doing? You all have touched on it previously in the last session here, so if folks would like to just expand a little bit more on TOPA or our approach into really trying to be a more community-centered coalition, would love to hear your thoughts. And
I mean, right now we are planning a kickoff event. And we have plans to do this in multiple spaces across the city of Minneapolis, but right now the upcoming one and the first one is on September 14th. In Colorado Center there. And that space being the first space where we say, hey, we're introducing ourselves to y'all, community league. We're Housing Justice League, this is what we do, but also, what do you want? We're asking the question very specifically. At you brought this up in the meeting, and it's kind of been one of our like guiding, I think, like our North Star in this cornerstone question. What does it look like if we own our neighborhoods? It's just our buildings, but being able to actively have that decision in what it looks like, how it's set up, what it smells like, what it sounds like, what that general experience is. So really taking in at this space, making space for people to, imagine, vision, have, a broader picture of what could we do here truly, shooting for the stars in that sense. But then also giving historical context to people. What Owen kind of touched on at the beginning is, base knowledge for my role as a housing organizer. That is, day one, hey, this is the setup of housing and the reality of how we got here in this state, in this country. But that isn't necessarily common knowledge. That might be felt knowledge. And I think it is felt knowledge for many communities that have been disenfranchised. They know what's going on, Black, Brown, Indigenous communities know what has been happening, but to talk about the specific policies to say these were intentional acts, we know that is known, but to give that background to say, that is a legitimate knowledge. We know that this happened, we need to recognize that, and that is where we need to be building out of. So, and deconstructing as well. So how do we deconstruct that to get to that vision, to that kind of big picture? This is what we envision for our communities, and how we can hold, and the process is going to be, that is going to look different for everybody. And so how do we hold that as well? How do we help create an engine for different visions to come to fruition, and celebrate that, the differences in that, it's not everybody's idea of what ideal housing or ideal neighborhoods is going to look the same, but how do we support in their vision? That I think is going to be our big question and our big, that would be chew on for a while.
I think something too that we talked about yesterday, because what people don't realize, we talk a lot. We actually have a meeting later today, so we're always together, always talking. But in regards to TOPA and kind of why TOPA, I think something that was mentioned yesterday, and I'd love for you to kind of dive deeper into, is just this work isn't new, and it didn't start with Housing Justice League. It didn't start with the people in the room. Like Reagan said, relatively new, myself, relatively new to the Housing Justice League space. And I think not only has it not started with us, but it did start with community, and there are beautiful examples of community essentially doing what TOPA is. There are examples with Miss Linda, I think is the most commonly known in South Minneapolis, who owned her home, lost it, and started renting that same home. And then the landlord was going to evict her and sell the home. And community came together, raised the funds, so she was able to buy her home back. That's the essence of TOPA, is providing the opportunities for the tenant to purchase their home, and hopefully also their resources as well. So we've seen community led this. We're kind of following the lead and trying to provide policy to allow more opportunities for more Miss Lindas, for more families and individuals who want to purchase their home, whether it's single family home or a group of tenants to come together and buy their quadplex, their duplex, their multi-unit apartment complex. So I think that's something that we wanna be clear and also celebrate and pay homage to the people who came before us, who did this work, the community members who showed up and did this work before TOPA was a concept. Like they created TOPA, and we just chose to come together to make this policy. So to your question, Juan Luis, about what are we doing that's in alignment with community. I think TOPA is that example of like we can't take ownership of this. We're just doing our part. But
Yeah, no, I love all of that. I think too, we've been thinking more and more about, again, this idea of creating space, right? So this idea of like a kickoff event being something that could be a monthly space that folks could come to for resources if they were facing displacement, right? What would it look like to have an early warning system as soon as a building goes up for sale? And there's a coalition as a monthly meeting that you can come to and say, like, I want to buy my building, or I'm facing displacement for this, that, or the other reason, right? And these examples, right, of like, the Sky Without Limits cooperative and the amazing work that Inquilinos Unidos has been doing, right? And Miss Linda, like, show that we don't have to have policy to demand what the end of that policy is supposed to bring, right? We can try and build it ourselves. And the policy can be one component of that in terms of codifying that right, because we do have the right to be rooted in our communities and own our buildings. And we've been having conversations about broadening the table too, right? We've been reaching out to new organizations to try and onboard them. We know that our geographical spread right now for our organizations for our bases is mostly in South Minneapolis, right? And that's not representative of everybody. So we're trying to broaden the table, get more organizations onboarded, and build tools that can help lead us in this. So we're partnered with Cura to try and create a mapping tool to put some variables in to determine what are vulnerable properties, right? What would it look like if we reached out to those vulnerable properties before they ever go up for sale? So they know that if their building is ever about to be flipped, right? Like, come give us a call, right? So it's a lot in motion right now. Like I kind of like that. I like that, like, it's not built yet, and we want as many voices as possible to build it.
Well, and we need as many voices as possible. We need hands. We need perspectives, because we don't know everything, even being able to speak like from a nonprofit. Like, I am, as a renter in Minneapolis myself, like, I have some of these experiences and these thoughts are mine, and I would benefit from something like this, but still working in the nonprofit world, like, I have levels of privilege within this, and it's my perspectives are skewed. My perspectives have a specific scent, or a specific lens to them, and it's not the end all be all. None of our perspectives are. So how do we bring them together? And I think that's the biggest piece here, is like, we need that. We need to have the hands, we need to have the perspectives to create a policy, or to create, I don't want to keep using the policy, to create a movement that is truly accessible and available to everybody. It should be easy for tenants to say, oh, my building's going up for sale. We've heard rumors about it. It should be easy to access that information of, okay, here's the step-by-step structure. That, like, that's one of my main priorities, is how does that easy across languages, across education levels, et cetera, so that, human, like, housing as a right is able to truly be, like, available.
I love it, y'all. Yeah, and we in our preparation for today's event, we had a long conversation around this next question here. So curious and really excited to see how you all tackle it. But yeah, what does success look like for House Justice League, right? And I think we've had a lot of really fruitful conversations on what, specifically what success looks like. So I'll hand it back over to you all.
What's a success look like? Ooh, that's such a good question. Um, and I love what we talked about even yesterday about, being so careful to make TOPA the end all be all. And kind of like what Ian was touching on earlier, but like demanding our rights. Like the policy is a part of it, but our end goal is community ownership. Our end goal is that transferring of wealth through property back into the hands that people who've been systemically denied that right and opportunity. Um, and that can be achieved through so many mechanisms. That's what's so cool about the work we all are doing in HJL, but also in our groups, is we're attacking it through various different angles. From okay, now they have the right. There are a lot of orgs working on down payment assistance, so there are resources now to actually be able to purchase. There are orgs committed to the development of affordable home ownership, focusing on toll cooperatives and community ownership in that way, multi-family units and home ownership in that way, but the whole community is also doing. So that there's so many orgs focused on how do we get our families and individuals in opportunities to own their homes. And TOPA is a part of that. So I think where there's agreement amongst the group that we're pushing for TOPA and know that success isn't just passing that. We're still moving forward in the larger goals. Again, how do we continually get community in opportunity to own their homes? And you guys know me, I've been preaching community centered, community led for so long in various spaces. And I think that's also what success looks like, is seeing community more embedded in the work with us, understanding that they have been again, one systemically oppressed. Let's name and own that. And also, there are reasons why they can engage in ways that we can engage, come to these coalition meetings, to come to these events, but it is our job to ensure that they have tangible ways to engage. And I think that evening event that Reagan was talking about on September 14th is an example. When we start door knocking, it's not just, we want to tell you about this, but we want to share how you can also join us in the work in various levels for you to engage, whether it's, yeah, come to our coalition meetings now, or call your elected on this, or you show up to this city council meeting, or you send a letter. Like there's various levels of engagement. We want to be able to share those with you and empower you to take on what is rightfully yours, and it's demanding more of your city electeds. It's envisioning and dreaming with us, so then we can create tangible next steps to achieve what community wants. So I think one, passing moving forward opportunities for true community ownership, but also creating movements that are truly community centered.
And I think to pull on that even more, what you're like, what you talked about there, and what I think is the success, and starting on a small scale with our ideas, like looking at a larger scale, is that we are working to compensate community for this as well. Like the knowledge, the perspective, the all of the time to get there, and ensuring that people are compensated for their efforts, for their contributions, the same level we are within, embedded within organizations, but still offering that outwards and like distributing that money directly back to people, and not towards printing costs, not towards our own reimbursing us for our salaries or whatever it is, but like saying, no, this is going back to you, like this is not just like a thank you for coming, but here's a tangible thing of like, we know that this took time, we know that this took effort, and we it sucks to say that that is, you know, a necessity of that for people to participate, but that is the reality. So I think that's a great success that we have taken that time and we have had very intentional conversations of how do we do that right? And how do we do that through different avenues, you know? Bring stipends to people that attend to our event is on the table. Bring long-term stipends for tenants and community members to come out with us door knocking, to talk with, you know, their neighbors, with their community. All of those things building up and just like setting that precedent that needs to be a norm. That we can't just keep taking knowledge, we can't just take this input from people without some compensation, without some acknowledgement that there is worth, there is true value to what they're doing to us. Yeah, I think that is a great success, and I'm really, that's something I'm really happy that we're doing. Yeah, we've had long conversations about it. I just really love that because that's a deep value.
Yeah, I think too, like something that we're dancing around a little bit, especially as like the nonprofit professional sitting at a table right now, is that the nonprofit industrial complex there are major issues with it, right? And I think sometimes our work gets siloed based on organizational self-interest. And I think that's a structural thing. It's not like a personal failing, right? And it's designed that way. But something that we're kind of talking about in terms of like successes of being, you know, get resources in community hands, build a sustainable base of community members that are driving the work, right? Is the idea that if we are going to be some stopgap that in many respects has been constructed to replace public services, right? How do we try and mimic the scale at which public services are necessary, right? And that looks like coming together as nonprofits, creating collective bases, and truly trying to funnel the resources that get lodged in our sort of entities into community hands, right? And that can look as simple as giving a community care stipend to come out to our event, and also trying to build funding relationships for millions of dollars to be put in the hands of tenants so that they can further bill it, right? So that's part of what success looks like for me. I know specifically is like, how do we try and scale like a true public resource within the context of the nonprofit industrial complex?
Thank you all. Really powerful messaging here at the end around success, and I think it's an ongoing conversation we'll continue to have around what success looks like for us. But I'd love to push this into the third question of today's panel, and focusing on vision. So as we discussed some organizing and our understanding of housing within the Housing Justice League, what do we need to scale these types of changes at the community and movement levels, right? To pivot more fully to solutions, how do we get to transferring ownership of housing into the hands of folks who live and occupy these homes? And I think these have been questions we have been wrestling with since day one, and continue to wrestle with. And one thing that I hope folks learned in the last section here is that we are not presenting ourselves as the Housing Justice League as a know-it-all kind of coalition of like we don't know all the answers, nor do we claim to know all the answers, but really excited and joining with community to collectively find those answers out together. So really excited to hear you all tackle this vision question here again. And it was a 2 question that I named there, so I can name them out again for you. What do we need to scale these types of changes at the community and movement levels, and as a component to that, to pivot more fully to solutions? How do we get to transferring ownership of housing into the hands of folks who live and occupy these homes?
Yeah, I can try and jump into this question. I think something that was powerful in the last few months in our coalition was asking like, if TOPA passed tomorrow, what would the city look like? And like realistically, like the spaces where TOPA has been successful in the past, like Washington, DC, right? There needs to be funding and there needs to be an infrastructure of education to let folks know what their right is and how they move into community ownership, right? And we as a coalition did not see the political will, even if TOPA passed tomorrow, the resourcing point actually being, provided by the city. Um, and so we've kind of bandied about with this like term, and it's kind of silly, and I'll take stability in the silliness of it, but this idea of the people's TOPA department, right? Like, how do we build the thing that they are refusing to do? And that vision, I think, again, is still coalescing. Like, we don't want to set that vision prior to having real, authentic community input. But we've kind of danced around some examples of it, right? Like, what would it look like if there was a monthly space that there's 3 tables at? One is, how do you build a tenants union? One is, how do you run a co-op, a housing co-op? And another is like, here's all the funding sources for you to try and, buy your building. Right. And as soon as your building goes up for sale, you can come to that space, the People's TOPA department, and you can ask for resources and try to get a skill set and some collective power to try and like interrupt the sale of your building or put property into community hands. Right. And I think that's kind of like very ambitious, but it's okay to have big thoughts. Because that's the only way that we actually like build something worthwhile, even if we have to scale down. And I think, yeah, I think that's kind of the vision is right. Like, what can we build if we come together as community members and a fleet of organizations to have a sustainable engine for the transfer of private property into community hands. And beyond that too, right? Like, this is about building power, right? Like, I think another idea of success is, what does it look like if there's a whole union of buildings that cooperatized or were tenant occupied and bought their building to try and like express their political will on the city stage, right? Like, that's really exciting to me. And that's a vision that I have more broadly of like, it doesn't really matter how we get there, right? But if we build the space and we give the resources for that to become a reality, for that collective voice to like truly have some type of power at the city level, like, what can we accomplish with that? So those are just some thoughts about the visioning stuff. I'd love to hear what y'all think.
I love that end piece that you're talking about, like building power. Because for me, when we talk about this, when we are talking about this, what I think needs to change and what we need to embrace fully is that this isn't just about people being given a chance to like buy their homes and get a return on their investment, like, when housing is sold or whatever, as it changes hands. This is about creating like a deep sense of belonging here. And recognizing that like, and believing and supporting and fully standing behind the fact that we have the capacity to own these properties. We don't need an outside organization to come in and buy these properties to manage them poorly for us. We do not need, outside entities to come in whose only stake in the game is how much money they're going to get back on this, or how many corners they can cut. Like, we live here. Our communities are not made up of structures, of LLCs, of developers, both nonprofit and private. They are made up of people. The people that own these buildings, typically, y'all don't live here. Like, they don't live here. We do. And that, I think, is there needs to not even just be a shift in structures and policies and ideas, but there needs to be a mind shift. Also, there needs to be a cultural collective shift that we have the ability to do this. We are responsible enough, we are resourced enough, we are intelligent enough to manage this and to do it better than people, out of state corporations coming in and buying up homes, buying up all the single family homes, buying up multifamily buildings, and going hands off and just seeing it as like a, you know, a cash cow, because it's like, that's not what it is. These are our homes. These are our places where we raise our families, where we, you know, imagine and dream and do all the big, beautiful things that like make Minneapolis, Minneapolis. So that's my big thing with that is, it's not just about building, putting on paper words, it's the inner mind thing of, we can do this and we're going to.
But they said. No, I love it, and I think even just touching on what Reagan just said, I love kind of the mention of single family homes. I think so often that's forgotten, even though high percentage of properties that are rented out are single family homes. We think of this disparate impact that has on places like a North Minneapolis, a high renter owned. A lot of these single family homes are being bought, like you said, by people who don't live in community, who aren't reinvesting in the property, but charging rent up as if they are. To your point about one, being able to transfer that property and ownership to that family or individual. Now it's a wealth builder generator for that, but also that is their home. That's where they get to not even start building community, continue building community, because these are relationships and communities of generation. But they don't have to worry about displacement. They don't have to worry about, okay, this new thing is being built off West Broadway. Oh, this is being built here on Lindale. What does that mean now when my landlord is going to increase the rent because of that, and now I have to leave? When I own it, I get to stay for as long as I choose, and building that opportunity for our family to build ownership and ownership of the property, but of that community of this is mine to stay and not just mine until I have to leave. So I really think that's an important piece, and that single family home opportunity to purchase is so crucial in that. And when we think of equity and how equitable something like TOPA is, this is a transferring of property, of wealth from typically white ownership to BIPOC ownership. So that's something I want to stress too, and why something like TOPA will actually advance us into the goals that every state elected, every city elected says they want to focus on, because everyone knows we were we have the worst disparities in the country, we have the worst disparities in the city. Of white ownership and our black homeowners. And I just want to touch on that piece, like TOPA brings closer to closing those gaps. But also I love again the community power, like we'll do this. But I also want to name, it's like that continual focus of we'll do this is a failure on our government. Because like, no, you should be doing this. So like I love like our willingness to take it up because government isn't. And I want to also transfer like community power, and we see you failing to commit to the promises you said you would. We see you voting no on things we said vote yes to, and we'll vote you out. So there should be a fear from our electeds that, oh, my constituents are watching me, and if I don't do what they say, I'm out. So I want that level of engagement, and it's exhausting, and it's designed that way, so that we're not participating in it as intentionally as we should or could be. And I want us to be so up in it, emailing our electeds, like, we literally saw what you said in this last city council meeting, but this percentage of constituents said we are for something like TOPA, we are for something like rent stabilization, we are for changing our zoning. Why are you still saying that? We see you, and elections are coming up, so your time, like the clock is ticking. So either like unemployed, this is your pick, your what does that stand for? Your performance improvement plan to your elected. If you don't change within this time frame, you're out. And I think that is something we need to really remind ourselves, and like you said, it's that shift of like, it's not just election day, we vote and then we're done, but it's like, no, we are we are in this with you. Once you're sworn in, and now with Minneapolis, with the 2 years you're sworn in, and if you don't deliver, you're out. And they need to also step in to provide the policy and the resources that we're naming we need. So I think that's the vision too of what this looks like. And I think we can achieve.
I love it. Yes. Well, we actually landed right on time, so round of applause to you. For doing numbing us back on the target. So thank you, everyone. We'll transition into our discussion portion here. We have allocated 15 minutes to hear from folks in the virtual space here. So if folks would like to either raise your hand or share your comments or questions in the comment section, please feel free to do so at this moment. I guess so. Well, we do want to leave space for this question. So if folks are typing or just getting back to your seat, please feel free to still indicate to us you'd like to jump on. But really grateful and appreciative of the
So, for sure, that's, so I'd like to be connected to the work with Pure, all properties.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you wanna email me, my email for JCA is just ian@jewishcommunityaction.org. Would be happy to have a conversation about it. That looks great to do. Yeah, it's only a few letter first names.
Even if anyone's interested in more local examples, community ownership, real estate, and non-housing space for now. Creative enterprise zone, St. Paul's, community investment opportunity. It's pretty.
I think that's really awesome. I mean, our focus is definitely housing, but within what folks have mentioned, right, our overall goal is community ownership, right? So community ownership for us, or at least for me, not only means residential ownership, but it does comprise commercial ownership as well. Right? What would corridors look like if it was dominated by the folks who live there owning their homes, whether single family, multi-family, or duplex or triplexes, to also having the local businesses folks patronize every day also be owned by the owners of that building as well. So thank you for sharing those resources. And we definitely, it's not our focus of our conversation, but we have a lot of partners, especially with folks in the Blue Line Coalition, who are focusing on what commercial TOPA would look like as well. So thank you for sharing that, Stephen.
So we got another question for Maggie from the Whittier Markets. What have been some of your responses? What have been some what have been some of your responses to landlords who are against TOPA?
I have some in my head. But
Yeah, what should we do on appropriate?
Yeah.
Okay, to encounter.
Yeah,
I'm guessing what.
I mean, I think that sort of the consistent boogeyman that many landlords seem to complain about in relationship to TOPA is the speed at which they can make a sale.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Right, they say it's interrupting their contract rights in order to, slow down the process, and they might be able to like capitalize on the full value of the housing market at the time they would sell. And my honest answer to that is I don't care. I don't care about that because I would like the city and our communities to view housing not as an asset for speculation, but as a use for somebody to have a home.
Mhm.
And if that means that we are going to prevent, the byproduct of your speed of sale, of displacement and trauma, folks who have been in our communities for years, right? Being forced into a contingent position and navigating this terrible rental market, right? Then so be it. And I think there's, many other examples of uh, intervening with public policy in a process like this, right? To make sure that our communities are still being centered and the rights and the wellness of working class people, BIPOC people need to be at the center of. So, I mean, I think that maybe it's not the most politically polished answer to that, but I really do think we should be pushing for housing as home, not as a tool for speculation.
Mhm.
And I think too, like to touch on that piece, the myths go out just like left and right, and I see opposition like really exaggerating what that wait period can look like. And I think correct me if I'm wrong, at worst, it's about 120, 90 day, like
Yeah,
it truthfully isn't like terribly long where you'll be sitting on this property for like 2 years. And the idea that you wouldn't be able to um get full value is also false because you are able to name your price.
Mhm.
And again, tenant opportunity to purchase, it's exactly that. It's the opportunity to purchase. So if you're setting that at $500,000 or $1 million or $2 million, it's the tenant has the opportunity to purchase that. I don't have 2 million, so like I wouldn't be able to purchase it. But like it's not that the policy's not forcing you to reduce it at $100,000. So again, there's a lot of misconceptions on what it is, and I think the true hindrance of TOPA is the timing. And I still don't believe that it is a hindrance that is to your detriment when the benefits fully outweigh your waiting period. Even if someone were to buy and you go into contract tomorrow, I mean, it's still like probably 30 days until you're actually closing. So you're waiting regardless. This idea that the house is on the market for a day is misleading because it doesn't switch ownership in a day. So I think there's a misconception that bleeds out to community that is false. And I think it's just rooted in a landlord's capitalistic nature of I want as much money as soon as possible. So let me sell to Palm Luis tomorrow for $1 million versus waiting for Reagan and the rest of the tenants to compile money to purchase at $1 million a month from now. So other than that, I mean, a landlord who tries to spew other issues with TOPA, personally, I believe it's trying to hide your racist and capitalistic views behind worries. But I'd love to have a conversation with a landlord who truthfully is concerned, but other than time, I don't see what the issue would be for a landlord who currently owns the property. And if you're telling me 45 days is too long of a wait, I mean, I have other questions for you.
Yeah.
I want to add on to this as well. Again, another mind shift here. Landlords, you have not made the greatest investment in that. Uh. Rent has been paid in for months, for years. By family that lives there. And to assume that you are the only one that deserves to have any return on that because your name is on the deed, not because you live there, but because your name is just on a piece of paper. I think that speaks to your capitalistic, racist, prejudiced nature, generally speaking. Yes, landlords make investments. Yes, they have the capital to get access to this, but fundamentally, as we're looking at it, the people that are primarily supporting, your ownership of that space are the people that live there. You are not paying your mortgage, they are paying your mortgage. The renters are paying your mortgage there. And just based on that fact alone, their investment warrants some level of opportunity, some level of space to say, okay, you're selling it, you no longer want to be there, you want to move to Arizona, you want to move to Montana, great. I still want to live here. I still want to send my kids to school. I still want to be able to sleep in my bed that I've been in, I've had the same room forever. Like I want to keep my decorations on the wall, etc. Give me that opportunity because I have helped you maintain and keep this property that whole time. And I think that's one pushback too, is just because your name is on a piece of paper doesn't mean that you've made the greatest investment and that you should have every right to deciding what happens there. It's inhumane.
I will hold my comment. You all tackled that very effectively, so I will hold my comment and we could read the next question. I think it's the same answer as well.
Well, for this two here, there's, sorry. Yeah, how can we better cross boundaries, Minneapolis, St. Paul, to build out the community?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it's definitely been something I think Housing Justice League has been around for 4 or 5 years, and it's been a constant question and theme that we've wrestled with within the coalition. I think the way that the coalition is composition, a lot of folks is focused geographically. It was within the city of Minneapolis, but recognizing our larger goal does branch outside of the Minneapolis borders. So I would say initially now we're very much open to connecting with folks and creating some type of foundational relationship, but our focus currently is still within the boundaries of the Minneapolis, and trying to create our TOPA's people department, at least initially within the city of Minneapolis, and hopefully then creating an outline or a foundation that others folks can replicate throughout our region. Any other?
No, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I think events like this are really great to be branching out and again, not be geographically siloed. Like, I think the biggest thing is like showing up and building relationships. And I think, even digitally like this, the fact that that question gets asked is a testament to trying to build some type of relationship across different geographic boundaries.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's hard. I mean, and it's intentionally difficult, right? The way that policy or governmentality changes across different levels. But I know that all the folks at the table here today, state level work on their plates and work across different cities and whatnot. But I don't know. I have a definitive answer to that.
If I could just shout out another coalition that always happens this staff and all the partners at the state are also part of, Equity Place, not explicitly working on tenant opportunity to purchase, given the cross-jurisdictional, cross geographic nature of that coalition, but that's been a space where across geography, across culture, folks have been organizing in coalition on some issues for a long time. So certainly another place that in terms of relationships might be relevant for, you all from St. Anthony Park, to listen. There's a conversation with, I'll put a link in the chat here as well, to showcase some of that work, but, that's another, yeah, another sort of regional focus coalition, essentially, so. Cool. So then Julie has a question, sort of saying, love what you said, Tammy, about how it's a systemic failure that community is forced to create when government fails to provide. How is HCL sustaining this work? How is Justice League funded? Or is House Justice League funded? Is that question? Sorry.
Yeah.
Julia, you answer that question.
Yeah. Yeah, so historically it has been funded sort of through staff time from different organizations and then piecemeal across the board, different organizations would take up like event costs and whatnot. What's really exciting about like our most recent reinvigoration of our campaign and our work is that we received a housing stability grant to actually have dedicated funding for the HJL space. And we've been primarily trying to think of that as a way to fund tenant involvement. But I think, yeah, we have larger questions about how to sustainably fund this work that we are grappling with at the coalition table, and I think there's lots of good ideas for it. Anybody else have thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think this time in our first iteration of funding ourselves through a grant opens more possibilities for that in the future. So the intention is to sustain this and is to be more intentional around having more regular funds coming in to continue to accomplish the community and then also to continue to host multiple events within the city of Minneapolis. So yeah, thanks. Thank you, Julia, for posing the question.
Yeah, it's a great question.
We make jokes because honestly, Julia spearheaded a lot of that effort. So thanks to her.
So mostly comments remaining at this point, but just want to read them out real quick. We have a few minutes still. Justin from Hamlin Midway Coalition, I just wanted to say I'm really glad I could be here today. I'm looking forward to connecting with folks here and other allies on our resident engagement efforts in partnership with St. Anthony Park and Co. Yeah, Justin, if you are still on the call, you might have left, but just gonna request any email or contact information to you for folks to follow up. Might be able to find it in registration as well. So, and then former city council member Cam Gordon so I just want to note that we have some sympathy, if we can have some sympathy for smaller landlords that can win over good landlords to develop a program that can work for more of them, our chances of being able to pass something and have it work well might be increased. Lots of times when they know they're getting fair market value, landlords have no problem with it. And then follows up. That's big landlords / developer orgs like multifamily, Minnesota Multifamily Association. We'll fight this. Fight this with say with all that they have and for a free market where they can make backroom sales to buddies. So we need to be ready to take them on and resist them. And the realtor associations were also very much opposed to this. And very well said. Certainly a number of us who've been doing these type of policy fights in different municipalities and or the state level are very well aware of those very well resourced, powerful entities and we're certainly willing and eager oftentimes to take them on. And sometimes it's almost a matter, I'll just speak for instance, it's also a matter of kind of masking them sometimes. There's been times that, especially Minnesota Multi-Housing Association has tried to create misinformation or poses that they are speaking on behalf of tenants or concern for tenants when they are in reality very deeply resourced, very powerful, very money landlords who are very much benefiting the status quo, and we are trying to change it.
I'd also like to make a comment to, smaller landlords, good landlords. Open invitation. Yes, please come, ally with us, show up and say, we support this. We support this on benefit of our tenants. We will benefit from this, but the greater benefit goes to the people that live in our housing. We need all sides involved in this to really get to the point there, but remembering and centering tenant experience, remembering and centering historically disenfranchised communities that have not had the opportunity to purchase housing, to settle, fully root down in the same way. Like, open invitation, yes, come. Like, we're not necessarily here to push back. We're here to make sure that everybody is getting a piece of it.
Yeah. Oh, well, we're getting close to 12:30 here, so I want to respect folks' time and appreciate everyone for joining us virtually and the comments and questions. Owen is going to share event registration, as folks have mentioned throughout the panel. Please come and join us on September 14th. The Housing Justice League is going to be doing our first front-facing event with community. As folks mentioned, we will be kicking off in South Minneapolis in the Potterhorn neighborhood at the Potterhorn Rec Center. Doors will open at 6 p.m. and the event will go from 6 to 8 p.m. We'll have as folks mentioned, the stipend for folks. We'll have free childcare and we'll also provide dinner that night as well. So please, if you're interested, come and join us on Thursday, September 14th. Again, from 6 to 8 p.m. And we look forward to seeing folks. And again, Ian and I currently serve as co-facilitators of the coalition, and Tammy and Reagan are also very happy to receive emails. But if folks would like to contact us further and engage, please feel free to reach out to Ian, whose email's in the chat here, and then mine is fawn@thealliancetc.org. So feel free to reach out to us, and we're more than happy to connect with folks. And if you are an organization in the city of Minneapolis and are interested in potentially building that relationship even further, please reach out to us as well. Well, perfect. With that said, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you to our wonderful panelists, and I know we'll be seeing each other again later this afternoon. Look forward to seeing you all again. And again, thank you everyone for joining us virtually, and looking forward to continuing this fight and this conversation and really developing the TOPA's People Department.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to us.